Are you alone right now, and secretly wondering if something is wrong with you, or if this quiet isolation is slowly proving that you've failed at life? And what if I told you, calmly, without shouting, without lies, that this loneliness might be the most intelligent thing you have ever done? Stay with me, because in the next minutes I will explain why this solitude is not a mistake, not a punishment, not a social failure, but a psychological transition that most men never survive. This is Psychology Unlocked. I am Dr. Adam. Listen slowly, and if this touches you, comment your city and share this video. Now, let us begin. You see, most men are terrified of being alone. Not because loneliness hurts, pain can be endured, but because silence removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, truth appears. And truth is heavy. In psychology, we know that the human mind will do almost anything to avoid prolonged self-confrontation. Noise, relationships, ambition, sex, conflict, even suffering with others, all of these can become anesthetics. But solitude does not anesthetize, it reveals. This is where Niccolò Machiavelli becomes deeply uncomfortable for the modern man. Machiavelli never wrote to make people feel good. He wrote to make people awake. He understood something brutal, something cold, something accurate, that power, clarity, and self-command are forged in isolation, not applause, and that the man who is always surrounded is often the man who belongs to everyone, except himself. If you are alone right now, there is a high probability that something inside you refused to keep performing, refused to keep smiling, refused to keep negotiating your truth for acceptance. And yes, this hurts, because the nervous system interprets separation as danger. Your body does not know the difference between social exile and death. Same cortisol, same anxiety, same chest pressure at night. But psychology also teaches us this. The pain of loneliness and the pain of growth share the same biological signature. Most men confuse the two. They think, I am alone, therefore I am broken, when in reality, they are alone because something false collapsed. Machiavelli would say, and I am paraphrasing slowly, that the man who wishes to build strength must first withdraw from illusion. And illusion lives in crowds. When you are constantly surrounded, you are constantly adjusted. Adjusted tone, adjusted opinions, adjusted ambition, adjusted masculinity. You become readable, predictable, safe. And safety is the enemy of depth. Loneliness strips you of mirrors. No reactions, no validation, no one reflecting back who you are supposed to be. At first, this feels like suffocation. Your mind panics. It searches. It replays memories. It invents scenarios. It says things like, maybe I should call her. Maybe I should lower my standards. Maybe I should become who they want again. This is not weakness. This is withdrawal. In psychology, we call this the extinction burst, when the brain increases discomfort to push you back into old patterns. Machiavelli understood this instinctively, long before neuroscience had language. He knew that when a man steps away from dependency, the world does not reward him. It tests him. And most fail here. They run back to noise, back to unworthy relationships, back to meaningless competition, back to being needed instead of being sovereign. But you, if you are still listening, did not run. And that already says something uncomfortable and powerful about you. Solitude is where identity reorganizes. It is where your nervous system recalibrates without external commands. It is where desire separates from habit. You begin to notice strange things. Your tolerance for nonsense drops. Your patience becomes sharper, not softer. You feel less eager to explain yourself. This is not emotional coldness. This is emotional economy. Machiavelli warned that the man who learns to stand alone will be misunderstood, even attacked. Because independence exposes dependence in others. Your silence becomes a mirror they did not ask for. And here is the part no one tells men. Loneliness does not mean no one wants you. Often, it means fewer people can control you. And control, psychologically, is addictive. People prefer the version of you that responds immediately, that seeks approval, that negotiates boundaries. When that version disappears, so do many connections. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer useful in the same way. This is where men start questioning themselves late at night. Am I becoming arrogant? Am I becoming cold? Am I losing empathy? You are losing submission. Machiavelli was not cruel. He was precise. He knew that compassion without self-command becomes exploitation, that kindness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. And solitude is where boundaries are born, because in silence, you finally hear which desires are yours and which were planted. You start asking different questions. Not, how do they see me, but do I respect myself when I am with them? That question alone empties rooms. Psychology shows that men who endure voluntary solitude develop stronger internal locus of control. They rely less on external approval. Their decisions slow down, but sharpen. They become dangerous in a quiet way. Not aggressive, not loud, but grounded. And grounded men scare systems built on compliance. If you are alone, you are not being punished. You are being prepared. Prepared for clarity. Prepared for selectivity. Prepared for relationships that cannot survive performance, only truth. This is why the loneliness feels sacred and brutal at the same time, because something old is dying, and something honest has not fully learned how to speak yet. Let it take its time. There comes a moment, usually in the deepest part of the night, when the loneliness changes its texture. It no longer screams. It no longer begs. It starts to observe you. This is the phase most men misunderstand. They think the pain is supposed to disappear. They think strength means silence without sensation. But that is not how the mind works. In psychology, transformation does not arrive as relief. It arrives as responsibility. When you are alone long enough, your excuses lose their audience. There is no one left to blame, no one left to impress, no one left to rescue you from your own inconsistencies. And this is terrifying, because now your life is yours again. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous moment for a man is not when he is attacked, but when he realizes no one is coming to save him. Because in that realization, something breaks and something awakens. You start noticing how much of your past behavior was negotiation. Negotiation for affection, negotiation for status, negotiation for peace. You tolerated disrespect because it was familiar. You stayed silent because conflict risked abandonment. You stayed busy because stillness exposed dissatisfaction. Now, there is no negotiation. Loneliness forces a psychological audit. You replay conversations and realize how often you betrayed your intuition to keep the atmosphere comfortable. You remember moments where you laughed, but something inside you tightened. Moments where you agreed, but your body disagreed. This is not regret. This is awareness, and awareness is painful because it demands action later. Machiavelli believed that most men live as extensions of other people's expectations, sons of approval, employees of validation, lovers of conditional affection. Solitude dissolves these contracts. At first, your identity feels thinner, less defined, almost empty. This emptiness scares men back into old roles. But emptiness is not loss. It is space. Psychology tells us that identity is not discovered, it is stripped. You remove what was borrowed, what was performed, what was conditioned, until what remains feels unfamiliar, but solid. You begin to speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because fewer things feel worthy of speech. You listen differently, not to respond, but to detect. You become slower to trust, but quicker to sense misalignment. This is where loneliness sharpens discernment, and discernment is lonely. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. You notice how many interactions are transactional, how many smiles are requests, how many friendships depend on you staying small, predictable, accessible. When you withdraw emotionally, even without explanation, people feel it. They may say you changed, that you became distant, that you are no longer the same.
They are right. You are no longer negotiable.
Machiavelli warned that men who develop inner sovereignty will be labeled cold, arrogant, or detached. Not because they lack feeling, but because they no longer leak it everywhere. In psychology, emotional leakage is not intimacy, it is dysregulation. Loneliness teaches regulation. You feel sadness, but it no longer controls your decisions. You feel desire, but it no longer commands your self-respect. You feel anger, but it no longer needs an audience. This is maturity. Quiet, uncelebrated, invisible. And yes, women notice this before men do. Not consciously, not logically, but at a nervous system level. A man who is comfortable alone sends a signal that cannot be faked. It says, I am not chasing relief. I am not hunting validation. I am choosing. And choice is attractive because it implies abundance of self. This is why loneliness often precedes magnetic presence. But here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot enter this state and remain liked by everyone. Your boundaries will disappoint. Your silence will confuse. Your standards will offend. Because standards are mirrors. And many people do not want to see themselves clearly. Psychology shows that when a man stops over-explaining, stops justifying, stops emotionally chasing, others project. They assume arrogance. They assume indifference. They assume superiority. In reality, you are conserving energy. Energy that was previously spent managing reactions. Machiavelli would say, this is when a man becomes internally fortified. Not hardened, fortified. Walls not to isolate, but to protect what is finally real. Loneliness teaches you that peace is not found in connection. It is found in congruence. When your actions align with your values, when your words match your limits, when your presence does not require performance. This is why solitude feels heavy, but honest. You are no longer fragmented, and fragmentation was exhausting. If you feel tired lately, not physically, but existentially, this is why. Your system is reorganizing around truth instead of approval, and that process has no applause, only silence. At some point, without ceremony, without announcement, something settles. Not happiness, not excitement, stability. The loneliness no longer feels like an open wound. It feels like a boundary. You still feel it, but it no longer defines you. This is where most men finally understand what they were being trained for. Niccolò Machiavelli never promised fulfillment. He promised clarity. And clarity is not warm. It is clean. You begin to move through the world with less urgency. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer rush to explain intentions. You no longer rush to secure outcome, because urgency is born from fear, and fear is loud. In psychology, we see this shift clearly. The nervous system exits survival mode. Your baseline lowers. Your reactions slow. You stop asking, what do they think of me? And start asking, what does this cost me? That question changes everything. You notice how peace increases when you say no early. How clarity increases when you walk away quietly. How strength increases when you do not announce your departure. This is not manipulation. This is self-alignment. Machiavelli understood that true power is rarely visible. It is felt in consistency, in restraint, in the refusal to overreact. The man who is no longer desperate to be chosen becomes the man who chooses. And here is the paradox. When you stop chasing connection, connection becomes selective. When you stop demanding love, love becomes calm. When you stop proving worth, worth becomes assumed. But by now, you are no longer dependent on these outcomes, because something more important has formed: self-trust. You trust your perception. You trust your timing. You trust your capacity to endure discomfort without self-betrayal. That trust is built only in solitude. Psychology confirms this. Men who spend time alone intentionally develop stronger emotional autonomy. They recover faster from rejection. They attach slower but deeper. They are not cold. They are deliberate. And deliberation is threatening to a world addicted to immediacy. This is why people will test you again. Old connections may resurface. Familiar dynamics may attempt re-entry. You will be offered comfort disguised as nostalgia. This is the final test. Not temptation, but familiarity. Machiavelli warned that regression is easier than growth because the old self still recognizes you. The old world still has a role prepared, but you no longer fit. And for the first time, you do not feel guilty about that. You understand now, loneliness was not the absence of people. It was the absence of noise. And in that silence, you learn something irreversible, that you do not need to be constantly understood to be whole, that you do not need to be desired by many to respect yourself, that you do not need to be surrounded to be grounded. If you are alone, and you are still standing, still reflecting, still choosing integrity over relief, you are not behind. You are ahead of a path most men never walk. And yes, it is quieter here, but it is also honest. This is Psychology Unlocked. I am Dr. Adam. If this resonated with you, share it with a man who is walking alone right now, and remind him, without words, that he is not lost.